if I was interviewing you for a mechanic job and we can't start the engine of the car and then you start going to the boot and checking the tires, I start getting worried because I'm like, okay, yes, maybe the tire doesn't have pressure. We don't argue that. But at the moment, the tire is not the issue of focus.
Okay.
Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I've got Bothwell Chikoto, who is currently working as a junior network engineer at one of the state universities in Zimbabwe. He is our first candidate who decided to take us up on the challenge to have a live interview and a role play. So I'm going to be asking him questions. He's probably going to give me an answer. And at the end, we'll probably review back and see which areas he did too well and which areas are up for improvement. The key objective is to help you so that you can be able to prepare for your own interview. Now, I'm just going to run you through Botho's history. He graduated from the University of Zimbabwe with a bachelor's in computer science. He started his career doing user support and grew into an IT technician. And now, currently, he's working at the State University as a junior network engineer. He is certified in CCNA. He also completed the certified ethical hacking and has done a few Google IT support certifications. And currently, he's pursuing his honors in telecommunications engineering. Bothwell, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on this interview.
All right, so we're just gonna go straight into the first question. Tell me about yourself.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Chikoto, as you have highlighted in the introduction. I am a Cisco certified network engineer. I happen to get involved in so many academic activities. I possess a number of accolades or certificates from different institutions that include regional and international. So to start with, I've got my diploma in IT. That's where I started my journey at Belvedere Technical Chess College in Zimbabwe, and I also went to acquire the degree in computer science at University of Zimbabwe. Then I happened to be liked by one of my companies which I was working as an intern, and they suggested that I should pursue and acquire a certification in networking, and it was kind of like a scholarship. Then I was awarded the scholarship to start for Cisco at an institution called T1 in Harare, Zimbabwe. Then after that, I happened to successfully pass the CCNA. Currently, I'm a holder of CCNA with Cisco and also CCNP online Udemy on Udemy Academy. I also got network security through a scholarship as well from Kenyatta University, where after finishing network security with the Kenyatta University, I was also awarded online by Cisco. I think it was a talent item for Africans, and I pursued to acquire the ethical hacking. I am currently engaged with one of the universities in Zimbabwe, doing a number of things. I deploy, I configure, I maintain a number of gadgets from different vendors. I think I am managing a network which have a WAN and LAN with a capacity of almost 20,000, because remember it's an university. So I'm managing lecturers, non-academic staff, and students, to be precise. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Now, you started as, or you did your internship at the Parliament of Zimbabwe, where you doing user support and being a network technician. Just walk me through what did your day to day look like?
Thank you so much for that question. It reminds me my days when I was at that institution. So my daily activities at this particular institution was to have a helicopter overview of what will be happening, especially on the issues of connectivity. What do I mean? I mean, I have to make sure that all the chefs, every user within the institution is connected, and Wi-Fi and Ethernet cables are properly plugged to the PCs, and everyone is connecting. Also, I had to make sure that systems, like for example, Windows operating system, Linux, and even application systems and software systems are also running properly on users' desktops and laptops. Also, I had to check. Sometimes we had routines to check the camera. We were monitoring the inside and outside building using the cameras. Basically, that's what I was doing. So installing operating systems, making sure that application systems, checking viruses. When you're dealing with users, some of them would even want to have you download movies. We're doing a lot of things. It was a good experience at Parliament of Zimbabwe.
Okay, I noticed on your CV you mentioned that you're probably involved in setting up of a DHCP server. Can you just walk me through, what is a DHCP server? What were you setting it up for, and what did it serve for the business?
Well, thank you so much. So basically, when we're talking about setting up a DHCP server, in essence, DHCP server is a dynamic host configuration protocol where in technology we are talking of a scenario where host or laptops or desktops or even phones needs to be given IP addresses. So for a LAN or a WAN to be able to give each and every device that is in request to have an IP address to connect to the internet, the DHCP should be able or has an ability to give that IP address. So precisely for a DHCP to give an IP address, it has some processes. We have what we call the ACSync, where the laptop or the user or the host, let me say so, request for an IP address. The DHCP would respond if the pool of the DHCP can give or can render that IP address, and it send an ACK message. And once the ACK message has been sent to the host, the host now is given the IP address, which is maybe defined by the network engineer of that particular institution.
Okay, and then what was the standard lease time for your DHCP scope? And if you can just probably explain to me what I mean by lease time.
Thank you so much. So when we're talking about lease time, it is a mechanism which exists in a DHCP technology that gives connected devices or regularly connecting devices. For example, let's say we have Tawia who is always connecting to our LAN. So every morning Tawia is assigned the same IP address, and this same IP address is given because of the list time. This list time usually in most gadgets or DHCP setups is 90 days. So 90 days means that after 90 days is lapsed, the DHCP will just have a reset, or it will just have a rollover to assign new IP addresses. So basically, it is the lapsing of time in the 90 days time period where a host that regularly visits that institution is given the same IP address.
Okay, no, fantastic. At some point in your academic studies, you came across the OSI model. Can you just walk me through what is the OSI model and just pick any of the layers that you might want to just give me more information in detail?
Okay, so OS model, if I would shorten like that way, is a 7-layer model which works or is a standard way in which data moves from the application layer to the physical layer. So it's a 7-layer reference model which entails or which discusses about how data moves from the application layer to the data link layer. To be specific and to pick one of the crucial layers, there is the physical layer. So the physical layer, this is where the user, the gadget is interacting or is dealing in a particular type of data. So in the OS model, you'd realize that data is not in the same format. It changes as it arrives to a particular layer. So in the physical layer, you'd realize that we are working with ones and zeros, or we are working with bits. So these bits now are usually channeled into medium, and this medium can be fiber, can be anything, and it is now transformed to become another type of or a form of data, so that it can be transformed to the next layer, which is the data link layer. And after the data link layer, you realize that there's network layer, there's transport, session, presentation, and application. So basically, that's the summary of the host layer model.
Okay, fantastic. Now, on the layer 4, we have TCP and UDP, and they're basically defined as connection oriented versus connectionless. Can you just give me in more detail what does it mean by connection oriented and connectionless?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. So TCP and UDP are layer 4 sub protocols, right? So TCP, when we talk of connection oriented, we are talking about the issue on with the connectivity between two hosts, right? So for example, let me give you an illustration. If I'm sending a message using an SMS, not a WhatsApp message, not a Facebook message, the sending message, the sending phone should make sure that the message is arrived in its correct form and its correct format. So in a connection oriented setup, we are talking about the delivery makeup or the delivery mechanism, where the message that is being sent should arrive to the recipient in its correct form and its correct format. So TCP caters for the sending and the arrival. It makes sure that whenever there is a data loss or there is data corruption within the transmission path, it checks and it rectifies if there is need for remodification of that data, so that it is arrived by the recipient in the same format and the same manner. But in UDP, it's like a situation where you're watching a television, on television you're watching a football match. So if there was no replay, you'd see that once a tackle has been made, no one will have to check what happened. So to be precise, in UDP, the sender doesn't care whether the data has arrived in its correct format or in its wrong format. So it just makes sure that it has sent. About the recipient, whether it has received the data, it doesn't matter. So in a UDP, you'd realize that there is no acknowledgement whether the data is arrived in its correct format or in its correct manner.
All right, that is great. Now, I want us to just cover some of the devices that we encounter on our network. I'm sure you probably heard of a hub, you've heard about a switch, you've heard about a router. Tell me what the function of these three devices are and how do they differ? A hub,
Okay,
a
thank you.
switch, and a router.
Oh, thank you so much. You'd want to understand that the main difference or in definition, right? A router works in the layer 2 setup, though in some cases we have also layer 3 switches, right? So I mean the switch. The layer 2 switch exists most of the time in the layer 2 setup, and the router is found on the layer 3. So what does a switch does in a network setup? It makes sure that some activities like a RP, address resolution protocol activity, is happening under its control. You'd also realize that it also works to make sure that the host or the connected devices in that switch understand, or they know which VLAN they belong to. So it also does the issue of VLANs, and it also have some security mechanisms on who should, like, it gives an access to users probably, or to hosts that are within its VLAN. But in essence, it passes packets from the host to the router for routing purposes. Now we're not talking about the router. The router itself is mainly, like its name, it's for routing. And when we're talking about routing, we're talking about the path in which data moves, so that it reaches its destination. For example, a host wants to reach facebook.com. So it is the purpose of the router now to find the shortest path. That's why we are now talking about OSPF, we're talking about EIGRP, we're talking about BGP. It has a mechanism of routing traffic from where it is supposed to go, and also it takes also the traffic from the destination, let's say from Google or from WhatsApp server, back to the user. So the purpose of the router is to find the route in which traffic should move, and in a fast manner and a reliable way.
Okay, I'm interested in knowing the difference between the hub and the switch. What's the main difference between those two?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. The main difference between a hub and a switch is about, let me say in a way which is maybe close. Let's talk about how intelligent a gadget can be. If we're talking about an intelligent gadget, we're talking about a gadget that is an ability to know what has happened in the previous session. But if we're talking about a dumb device in a network like a hub, it doesn't know what has happened previously. What it does is just to forward what it gets, and in that way it's working as a device. So a switch is called an intelligent a device in a network, because it knows who has requested this and where does it go. We're not talking about forwarding mechanism. We're talking about broadcast, we're talking about multicast, we're talking about unicast. So the switch can be able to interpret and know that this message or this packet or this frame is a broadcast frame, or it's a unicast frame or anycast frame. But a hub doesn't know. That's why you see that in modern technologies, hubs are no longer in use.
Okay, that's good. Now let's look at IP addressing. Tell me what's the difference between IPv4 and IPv6?
Okay, thank you so much. So when we're talking about IPv4 and IPv6, you understand that IPv6 have 128 bits, yes, and the IPv4 is 32 bits. Also, when we're talking about the format, IPv4 have 4 octets, and IPv6 is, if it is 128, as how is it? I'm kind of like losing the formatting and the octets in the bits in every segment of an IPv6. But basically, we're talking about 128 bits and 32 bits to be precise.
Okay, I guess what I'm looking for is just the overview of what is it that IPv4 could not do that we needed IPv6. What are the challenge and what are the limitations of IP version 4?
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, for that clarity. When we're talking about these two animals, IPv4 and IPv6, we're talking about the depletion of IP addresses. You'd realize that IPv4 is nearly 32 billion a number of IP addresses available. But when we're talking about IPv6, we're talking about even 3.4 underzillion available IP addresses. That, which means that we can't exhaust, even when we're talking of IoT, where every human or every user can have 10 gadgets that need IP addresses. We can't exhaust IPv6 IP addresses, because you remember when we're talking about IP addressing scheme, we're talking about n to the power of n. So we're talking about 128 to the power of 128. You see that it's a big number. If you are not very aware of mathematic reading, you'd fail to reach the last number of IP address, IPv6 IP address. But IPv4, I'm sure there are some rumors that very soon they will be sold to companies, because they are in their depletion phase.
What is the subnet and why is it important?
Yes. So when we're talking about subnetting is a big topic on its own. So subnetting, it covers issues of how many hosts or how many devices can be connected to a particular segment of a network. Um, so for as a network engineer, it's your role to make sure that you preserve or you safeguard the use of IP addresses. There are so many reasons why we do subnetting, but going back to its core, subnetting covers the hosts that are supposed to connect to a particular network chunk, or it also talks about the broadcast IP address. It also talks about the start and the end IP address that can be allocated to a particular network chunk. Let me give an example. Let's say we were talking about /32, and also I had forgotten about the subnet mask. So subnetting covers the issue of subnet mask, and the subnet mask is kind of like a reverse or a translation of what has happened to the 32-bit octet. For example, let's talk about class C IP address, which I'm going to give and try to subnet in a quick way. So we have 192.168 .0.0, right? So you see that this is a network chunk, right? And from this network chunk, I can be asked, or I can be given this network chunk to be divided to four segments, or to four VLANs, where I'm supposed to do now the practical subnetting. For example, I can be said we need 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 a network that only caters for 10 users in a subnet, and a network that only caters for 2 users in a network. And we also need a network that covers only maybe 6 users in a network, or 100 users in a network. So in the concept of subnetting now, it's now your duty now to make sure that you don't create a network that has so many available IP addresses that are not used. And also the subnet should also cover the available given number. You can't, if for example, let's say 192.168.0.0 /32. If I give that IP address scheme to cover 6 users, you'd realize that it won't be able to do that, because /32 only needs 2 hosts, because it's a point-to-point kind of subnet IP address scheme. So at the end of the day, subnetting is one of those interesting and very crucial things that I have been doing, and I have mastered the concept. I see. I think you can see that in a way I'm trying to explain. There's a lot that I can say on this interview, but for purposes of time, I think it's about the network chunk, the host, the broadcast, the number of IP addresses that can be given in a set of subnet.
All right, I've got some questions. So when we talk about subnetting, we have the available addresses, in a particular subnet, and this includes the network address and the broadcast address, right? So all included. If we are talking about a slash 26, how many IP addresses are in a slash 26 subnet?
Okay, let me do the live mates while you're watching. So if you said you need 26 hosts, or you need
No, no,
slash
no, just a
26
slash 26. Just a slash
slash
26.
26. Okay,
Yeah, how many addresses are in a slash 26 subnet?
so I think the math is so simple. It's 32 minus 26, which is I think 8, right?
Okay.
26. Yes. So it's 8. So the only available IP address that can be allocated to host, excluding the network and the broadcast, is 6, right? Because from it's 4, I mean, sorry, it's 4, because 26 minus 30 is 4, then 2 for broadcast and network. So I can only allocate 4 IP addresses. I can only connect 4 gadgets or devices in that network. Is that what I?
Okay.
No.
No, that's fine. That's fine. And when I'm talking about a slash 30, how many hosts or IP addresses are available in a slash 30 subnet mask?
Okay, so it's 30 minus 32, then that is 2 to the power of 2, which is 4. So which means the last question, I think I made some mathematical calculations. It's 4 to the power of 2, which is 16. So in a slash 26, I think there should be 16. Then we exclude the broadcast and the network
All right,
IP address.
that's good. Earlier on, you spoke about VLANs. Now, VLANs are a very important construct when we're dealing with networks. What is your understanding of a VLAN? What is a VLAN? Why do we need them? And how have you used VLANs in your past roles to segment traffic on your network?
Okay, thank you so much. So a VLAN is a virtual local area network. It's a LAN, or it's a virtual LAN which exists in a LAN. So it's an existing LAN which is a subset of the existing LAN. So basically, with VLANs, the purpose, as you said, is for segmenting and separating and making sure that there is no chaos or there is no congestion in the network setup. There are so many reasons why we do the VLAN things, and one of them is security, right? So when we're talking about VLANs, we're talking about a scenario where even after segmenting, you'd realize that we need to amalgamate those segmented network to still pass maybe through one door or one gate. So that's where we're now talking about the router on a sticker, where the switch which has segmented the network still needs to communicate with a single router. So we're now talking about sub interfaces. In as much as they exist in different segments, but still they still need to communicate, and in a setup where we have configured VLANs, you realize that each network exists in its own, and but however they can be able to communicate. They can also have an ability to reach out to the router, especially in a setup where I'm saying we can use the router on a sticker technology or mechanism.
All right, so let us look at some scenario based questions. Just walk me through one of the most challenging experiences that you've had in managing a network. What was the challenge? What was the issue, and how did you solve it?
Okay, let me think of one. Um, I think I'm thinking of a scenario which was not too sophisticated. But let's talk about one I just recently encountered. So there is an old router, 1941 a router. This router is within our LAN, but it has been abandoned. It has been working properly, I think, for 3 years. No one touched it. You know, the theory about when it is working, don't touch it. So it was never touched, and it has so many issues. There was a time now when it was now underperforming, users now complaining that the traffic or the speed of the network within that LAN was now becoming too slow, that they can't do any activity on the internet. So I had to visit the site, and I tried to access the gadget using remote access. I thought maybe telnet was configured on the gadget, but it was not configured, and I had to go on site. And after arriving on site, because it has not been accessed, uh, I nearly failed to access the device through party, but however I was successful, because the device has some issues on drivers. Even my PC was failing to sync with the gadget, but however I was successful. Then when I issued, or when I tried to run and check what configurations were configured using the show run configuration on Cisco, I realized that there were two sub interfaces that were configured on the gadget. The other one was going to other traffic. I don't know if the engineer had configured. I'm sure he was trying to configure HSRP. I don't know what happened there, but what I discovered was there were two sub interfaces that were existing on that device, and the most used sub interface was now neglected. Like the ISP was no longer providing internet to the gadget. I don't know why it was sometimes working and sometimes it was not working. So what I did was to remove the sub interface, and use only one sub interface, which was connected to the current ISP, which was providing internet for that route, and the issue was resolved, and people enjoyed they were back with their fast internet.
So you get a phone call, and you get a report that multiple users are experiencing intermittent network performance on the network. Walk me through what will be your troubleshooting steps.
Okay, thank you. By intermittent, you mean a slow network, right? I'm sure that word. You mean
Um, assume I'm the user, right? Hi, Bothwell. I'm calling from the admin office, and a few users in our office are experiencing intermittent network issues. And I was just calling for you guys to be able to assist. Now, walk me through what questions you might want to ask me to help you troubleshoot your problem, and how would you go about it.
okay? Well, thank you so much. So in that situation, when I receive a call from the admin section, I would give a hope to the caller and say thank you so much for calling me, and we are working on it and try to resolve what has been happening. If I need something, I would call you instantly. So what I do is, my first step is to check the router. I can access the router that is providing internet to that particular section. So I check in the internet. I check in the router if the router can access the internet. So I can issue maybe a command like a ping 8.8.8, repeat maybe 100 times to check if the router can access internet without any tripping packets after the pings. So if I realize that maybe the router is okay, it means that the issue is not a layer 3 issue. It probably be a layer 2 issue. Then if it is from a distance, I would maybe call again to the user to check if they can maybe, I'm assuming that the user has used his cell phone, is not used the landline, because in some cases where you have phones connected to the LAN, if a user is calling to using that phone, it means that probably there is internet. Maybe the issue is about the gadget. So I'm assuming that he used a cell phone, right? So if he used a cell phone, I will return the call and say, do you have electricity from that side? If electricity is available, it means that it's not a power issue. Maybe it's not a holistic power issue. I mean, so I have to move to the site. So when I arrive to the site, I have to access the layer 2 gadget, which is the switch. I check whether the media converters. I'm supposing that the switch is connected by fiber. So I would check if the media converters LED lights are all working properly. And if I check that the LED lights are working properly, it means that the switch itself is connected to the router. So I have removed the layer 3. I have also removed the problem of the media converters and fiber. So which means there's a link that is existing between the switch and the router. So I would also check if the switch is not been tampered with. I mean, in terms of configuration, like just quickly running show run. I check if my DHCP is okay, and all interfaces are up. When I realize that everything is okay within the switch, then I can go to one of the users. I check whether they are connected but can't access internet, or the gadgets, or the gadget is not accessing internet, because in some cases they when all ports or when all interfaces are up, it means that it's an individual problem that is being faced by that particular time. Usually users don't communicate that I'm experiencing internet, and when they report cases, they report cases for departments, not for individuals. So what I would do is I will now narrow down to check individuals, specific individuals probably that don't have internet. So maybe probably it's an IP conflict, or maybe someone configured a static IP address on the gadget. So probably that IP address is now conflicting with the DHCP. It's a matter of now releasing the static to the dynamic. Maybe probably it's the issue of the hardware. The NIC, the network interface card, probably could have failed, or maybe it's a thing of a loop. Maybe someone has created a loop, so their brainstorms is now a physical check to check whether all cables are plugged to the correct ports, and no brainstorms have been created, especially in that particular department. Of course, I know my answer might be haphazard, but in a real scenario, you'd realize that it can be quick. You can have a top-down approach or a down-top approach. You can start by checking the user's connectivity, going to the layer 2, going to the layer 3, something like that. But in this case, I choose to start from layer 3, layer 2, then devices, hardware, then check the cables, and also the devices itself.
If I were to ask you to go and upgrade the Cisco switch on the network, walk me through the whole process of how you'd go about upgrading a Cisco switch.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm using my school knowledge. I've never upgraded any Cisco switch during my experience, but generally when I want to upgrade, usually the probably the Cisco switch might be on ROM1, or it have got an ordinary or an old firmware. What I do is I might use a stick. I might get an ISO image of the latest image of that particular gadget, and insert, then try to navigate. Nowadays it's GUI. I can just navigate to access the file which is in the flash drive, then update the firmware.
Oh, that's fine. You did mention that you have probably not encountered the upgrading of a Cisco device in a production environment. Guess what I was basically looking for was that obviously there's the downloading of the iOS image from the Cisco website or from whichever source you are getting the image from, and then you have to copy the image to the device's boot flash or flash of the device, and then you have to change the boot sequence to ensure that it boots into that image, and then that will probably involve reloading the switch, but also being mindful that before you reload, you want to make sure that you save the config and you want to copy the configuration to a remote location just in case the device doesn't come back online. You're able to restore that particular image from backup, and in also being mindful that if it's a production switch, you probably need to get an outage window so that you do not disrupt the business as you're basically doing it. But like I said, I just took time to explain because you did honestly say that you haven't encountered that step in a production environment. Now we're probably kind of getting to the end of our interview, and I'm probably going to be throwing you some just random questions. Like what is a VPN?
A virtual private network.
Okay. What does OSPF stand for?
Open shortest path route. Or, or open shortest path forward. Sorry, I think my mind is becoming.
No, take your time. Take your time.
I don't have
Okay, that's fine. BGP.
uh, border gateway protocol.
EIGRP.
Exterior interior gateway protocol.
Okay. What is the difference between multi-mode and single-mode fiber?
Multi-mode and single mode fiber. We're talking about only a single node, or a single point, a single pin that is connecting to a single port, and we're not talking about mount. We are talking about many ports being connected by many connections.
Okay. And network address translation. How does it work? Why do we need it?
Not
Yes.
we are now translating the IP addresses, all the IP addresses to become one, using which is now the public IP address to access the internet.
Yes, but why do we need NAT?
You remember we once talked about the issue of IP address being extinct and depleting. So it is a technology where we holistically create IP addresses to be bunched in a same way that can be accessed to internet, because we can't have every user now or IP address requesting for a particular resource in the internet, but rather we use nothing, so that when we're accessing the internet, we are using that that technology.
Okay, and the last question is: you've been hired as a network expert to deploy a new network in an office building. Walk me through, you know, the process that you would go through in designing. What are the things that you would consider? What devices would you need? Just walk me through. I've come and requested you to provide a network in a new office building. Go ahead and let me know what it is that you, how would you go about it? What would you need and everything else?
Okay, so to start with, if I've been requested to come and have a network in a particular office, the first thing I would ask is the number of users that need to connect to that network. So if I'm given the number, it means that I'm now be able to calculate or to know the resources that are needed. For example, these are things that probably are essential for putting a network in that in that office or in that department. For example, the number determines even the number the type of cabinet which I'm going to use. Am I going to use a 3U? Am I going to use a 9U? How many switches do I need? For example, I might be requested that there are 100 users that needs to be connected. So it means that I'm using more than two 48 port switch. So in that scenario, I would need a 6U cabinet, where I'm going also to make sure that power is inside that cabinet, and it is secure, and also maybe media converters, and all those things, like for layer 2 networking. Then I also need to have a patch panel, where probably they might be in the same department, but in different in different rooms. You remember the structure, our most of the structures have a ceiling, so cables would run maybe inside the ceiling, and when they arrive to the patch panel, they need to be smartly terminated. So I would need to know which rooms and how many rooms, and after that, probably I would need also to have resources like mounted faceplates, where users would just plug and connect to the internet, and also I would also need distances, maybe from this port of internet, where I have mounted a faceplate that is connected to the switch. How long will be how long will be the user from the port? Maybe it is 3 meters, so it means that all my fly leads or my Ethernet cables will be 3 meters. And I would also need to make sure that they are smartly connected, maybe tied up, so that they don't get loose. And also I would make sure that what else probably is needed. I would, yeah, I think basically those are things, the resources versus the number which I'm given, and the implementation on connecting them to the internet. I'm assuming that the switches is connected to the router.
All right, fantastic. Once again, thank you for taking your time and allowing us to have a role play and to have an interview with you. I hope and trust that you enjoyed the interview, and probably in the next section, probably going to be breaking down. I really enjoyed, and I can safely say that you did uh, exceptionally well in the interview. Yes, in certain sections, the the answers took a bit of time to come through, which is probably something that we're going to discuss as we go through. But I feel like most of the technical aspects of what I was asking, I probably got the feedback. Maybe areas of improvement, being able to get to the answer as quickly as possible, without talking too much. Because sometimes when you talk a lot, we entangle ourselves, and then we end up kind of like missing the mark. But like I said, I think majority of the questions you did explain, what the concept was about. So I'll just probably just take take you from the top on the questions that I was asking and how I think you fared in those questions, and what would be my advice for someone who would get quite a similar question in an interview, and how probably would be the best way to answer it. So DHCP, obviously, dynamic host configuration protocol. Being able to explain the acronym, you did that pretty well. It is a protocol that issues out IP addresses automatically on a network, so that users don't have to configure IP addresses manually on devices. The automation basically just simplifies address management. And then also, when you're talking about DHCP, I asked you about lease time, and this one was a very technical question with a technical expectation. So the usual standard lease time on a Windows machine is about 8 days, right? And lease time is just basically the duration that the DHCP gives you an IP address. After which, after 8 days or whatever the lease time is, it can be shorter. Then the DHCP then calls back that IP address and gives it to someone else. So that's basically that. And you did explain about the lease time. Though you gave me a list time of 90 days. Maybe Linux machines have 90-day list times. Windows, I know Windows being standard 8, but that's not the most important part. On the OSI, you did explain the OSI model and its reference part. And I always encourage people with the OSI, pick one layer that you're very comfortable with. Practice that one layer and explain it fluently without thinking too much about it. You did talk about the OSI, though it took a bit of time to kind of like get to the information that you were putting across as you were answering. My advice is when you're talking about the physical layer, just keep it precise. This is where the electric signals flow, bits, ones and zeros. You had those in your answers. Fantastic. And then you just stop, because I'm asking about the OSI, and you're like, layer two is the data link, MAC address switches. Layer three, routers, IP addressing. Then you stop. You've answered. You've given your answer. And but sometimes when you take longer, you probably might find yourself entangling. You did a very good explanation on connection oriented TCP versus connectionless UDP. Basically, connection oriented protocol is one that verifies and ensures that the traffic has made it to the destination, and TCP uses a mechanism known as the three-way handshake, which ensures that it acknowledges that the packet has made it to the other side. UDP on the other end, connectionless, doesn't care. It's like writing a letter. You send it, it might make it, it might not make it there. So that was my take on that. On the hub and the switch, you did throw the term, dumb terminal when you're dealing with the hub, and when you're dealing with the switch, it's a more intelligent device. I guess the technical aspect that I was probably looking for in that question is the collision domains and the broadcast domain. With the hub, the whole device is one broadcast domain, and the whole device is one collision domain. But with switches, each and every port on a switch is its own collision domain. And that is why switches are more intelligent, because then it breaks the collision domains and makes it much more simpler. But and then routing devices, the objective is to route traffic on our network. Then we went to look at routing protocols. No, maybe I didn't ask this one. I wrote a few notes, so I'm just trying to go through the notes that I wrote. And then we looked at IPv4 versus IPv6. Now, yes, you could go technical, on the number of bits between the two. And once again, the danger of going too technical is that if I lose the technical information, I might end up discrediting myself. Where you could have just looked at, IPv4 is the older one. We're running out of IP addresses. And as the technology started growing, now each and every household, not only does it have a PC, but it has a laptop, it has an iPad, it has a phone, it has a fridge that needs internet. You've got your robo cleaners that need internet access. So there was a limitation of IP addresses. IPv6 gives us that wide range of IP addresses. So basically, by just taking it at a high level, you've basically explained the concept. Don't get yourself stuck too much into the technical aspects of the protocol, unless if someone asks, what is the difference between a 32-bit and a 128-bit. Then yes, you might need to go technical. But generally, when someone is asking from an interview standpoint, they usually want to just have an overview of your understanding between the two protocols, IPv6 and IPv4, and how they basically differ. So that would be my part on that one. Subnetting, when someone asks about subnetting, is basically segmentation of your network, and you would segment it for multiple reasons. Sometimes it's for security reasons. Sometimes because when you're segmenting for security reasons, you want to separate your specific traffic from other traffic on your network. You segment for efficiency. You want to reduce the size of your network so that you're able to. So the whole process of subnetting is just basically breaking down something into something smaller. The easiest you can think about when you're talking about subnetting is think about a pizza. You cut a pizza into 8 slices so that it's easy for you to consume, it's easy for you to share. Subnetting is similar. You break down your network so that, like I said, there are multiple reasons, but mainly it's just manageability of your network and making it much more smaller. And then on the subnetting, yes, that one. Slash 24, 256 addresses, 254 usable. Slash 25 divide by 2, that makes it 128. Slash 26 divide by 2 makes it 64. Slash 27, 32, slash 28, 16, 29 is 8, and then 30 is 4. Yes, so that one, you need to, if you're going to be asked about subnetting, just make sure that you've got your subnet masks and your side annotations on point. What else did I ask? VLANs, once again, virtual local area network. I guess the most important part on VLANs is it's a logical segmentation of a network, right? It's not the physical. When I'm saying it's not the physical, is that in one switch, you can be able to separate it into multiple VLANs, which means you're logically segmenting that one switch and creating different VLANs on that one switch. So port 1 to 4 can be in VLAN 10, port 5 to 10 could be VLAN, you know. So that part, like, but you answered it pretty well. There are reasons why you segment VLAN: security, just to separate traffic. Sometimes it's business requirements where certain traffic needs to sit all by itself. And then I don't know. Maybe before I get to the scenario-based questions, what's your take on the feedback?
I think it's it's quite okay. Yeah. I'm getting that someone was very attentive. Was very attentive, especially when
I've
someone can
got I've
speak.
got a whole lot of notes. I was writing down. I was writing down, and the reason I was writing down is, not only for your feedback, but for people that are going to find themselves in interview scenarios, especially that are network related. That when you get a question, answer it, and if you don't know, don't be afraid to say, "I haven't read on this subject. It's been a long time." Like you said about the upgrading of the switch, you're very honest. I've not dealt with this, which is very good. As an interviewer, it's commendable because then at least it helps you analyze where someone is. Now, when you came to the scenario based questions, I felt that yes, you answered the question, but maybe not in the manner that I was looking to get a response. So, so the first one was, troubleshooting steps. You get a call from a user and they say that multiple people are experiencing intermittent issues. Now, from your response, you went straight to the router, right? Which is good and bad. Good in the fact that yes, you looked at the router, but I felt like you failed to articulate step by step information. Like if you got a call, you could have asked the user, what do they mean by intermittent? Is it going on and off? How often is it going on and off? How long does it go on? How long does it go off? Like someone can say every 30 minutes, we lose internet for like a minute or we lose access for like a minute, and then it continues working. The more the questions you ask the user, the more you start formulating what might be the issue. Right. So I would have probably asked, like, what do they mean? How many people are affected? Right? Because they said many people are experiencing. Is it people in the same floor? How do they know that people are experiencing the same issue? Maybe they're the receptionist. People came to them and said, "Hey, I'm experiencing 1, 2, 3, 4." Right? So by asking how many people, you're trying to understand. Like for example, if you're in a three-story building, is it users on on floor one only that are experiencing the issue, or it's floor one, floor two, and floor three? Right. So by just asking how many people, you kind of get more information. The people that are affected, are they connected to the wired network or they connected to the wireless? Because if the wired people are not affected, but the ones that are connected to a wireless network are getting affected, then you start formulating, okay, maybe it's a wireless access point issue versus it's a network issue. And by asking, people, is it floor one or floor two or floor three? If you've got different switches in each floor, you are able to start determining whether it's a particular switch that's the problem. And then after that, you can start going into the router. And sometimes it's also important to know, where are they experiencing intermittent issues trying to go to? Are they trying to access the local server? Are they trying to access the internet? Because they might have intermittent issues just to access the file server where they need to be able to do their day-to-day work. So the question was probably trying to uncover your troubleshooting steps, gathering information from the user. Because the moment the user puts the phone down, then you can no longer collect information, and whatever you're working on an assumption of what you think, which you made very clear in your statement, that you're assuming that A, B, C, D, but there's information that you could have collected from the user that would have helped you to solve the problem. Now I asked you a question. I asked you a question about a problem that you encountered, a network problem that you encountered, and how you solved it. I'm probably going to share a technique that I always tell people. It's called the STAR technique. STAR is S stands for situation, right? So once again, this is one of the scenarios that you need to have a story that stays in your mind. What was the situation? Quickly give the situation. what was the task, what was the action, and what was the result. And you did very well. Situation: old router, slow performance, 3 years. The task was network was down, users were not able to get to the internet, and the action, you went, removed the sub interfaces, and then the result, network was restored. So you covered all those aspects. In future, just try and summarize that, but you are on point. So just carry that in mind. And for those that are watching, just be mindful whenever you ask scenario based questions, just use the STAR technique. What was the situation? What was the task? What was the action? And what was the result? And you did that pretty well. And then the upgrading of the switch, we went through that whole process, and I walked you through the steps. In terms of the the OSPF acronyms, BGP, and everything else, frankly speaking, they are not very important. I guess these questions are basically asked to find out your ability to think on the spot. And if you don't know, just say I don't know. And most people kind of get themselves stuck too much, like, I didn't get the acronym of BGP. Like, no one cares what acronym for BGP is. Like, I cannot quantify you as a good or bad engineer just because you don't know what BGP stands for. I'm probably interested in understanding your ability to configure BGP than the acronym for BGP. But we always ask these questions just so that someone can be able to say, I don't know, I don't remember. EIGRP, I mean, yeah, it's, don't beat yourself too much. And some of these questions, when they come too early in the interview, they can actually throw you off, because then your confidence levels are going to be impacted because you're thinking, I didn't get what OSPF stands for. Like, yes, it's good to know, but no one really cares. Right. Single mode, multi mode. Once again, single mode, you're basically dealing with a single strand of fiber. So one light that is being sent through the fiber strand. And then multi-mode, you got multiple light signals and they bounce off as they go. That's number one. Number two, single mode fiber travels longer distances as compared to multi-mode. So you can probably travel distance up to 40 kilometers with single mode, and multi-mode probably 5 kilometers plus or minus, might get up to about 10. So when that question is thrown, those are kind of like the two fundamentals that they're looking for, that you're able to understand. And like I said, the quickest way to get to the answer, the better. Network address translation. What I was basically looking for was private addresses, public addresses. On the internet, we use public addresses. In internal networks, we use local. So we use private addresses. And private addresses are not routable on the internet. So for us to go on the internet, we need a public address. And that is what translates our private address into public address. And then you can then go into the different types of NAT that are available, like one-to-one NAT, static NAT, port address translation. But the fundamental part of NAT is private and public. And then yes, and then when I asked you about the new network, fantastic. You number of users. That's very important. You did mention about 48 port switch, and simple as that might sound, just the fact that you said 48 port switch makes me aware that you understand the types of network switches that we have, and 48 port is one of the configurations that's common on network switches. Um, Cabinets, yes, well and good. That is fine. Patch panels, and once again, you went too deep, and in some instances, might have lost you in your explanation. So for that, there's no right or wrong answer. But expectation was obviously number of users, how many floors are you dealing with, and how many switches are you going to require, and MDF, for your distribution. And then obviously, yes, you did mention uh, the cabinet. So you're going to get some of these random questions. Once again, you need to be able to think on the spot. Like, if I'm deploying a new network, what do I need? How many IP addresses do I need? If I'm going to have 200 users, am I segmenting those users according to departments? All these things then come into play. But it's a night. There's no wrong or wrong. There's no right or wrong answer. I guess the way you answer it basically exposes the level of your depth when you're basically dealing with some of these concepts. So yes, that was my feedback. But like I said, I was pretty impressed and happy, and I hope there were some key takeaways in the feedback for the interview from my end. But
Okay, so it's not a contest actually, but I find it very difficult sometimes. When you're in an interview setup, sometimes the interviewers would ask in relation to a global understanding of how standards networks should work, the vis-a-vis what experience you have. For example, I go back to the troubleshooting issue, right? So you'd realize that
yes,
in your head or in your heart, there's a culture because when you're dealing with one particular enterprise kind of network, right? You know for some reason that in Office D there's a media converter that always fails. So I just go and plug and do this thing. So sometimes you overcarried or you have an imagination of your daily to daily troubleshooting mechanism, of which I applaud that probably it needs for someone to maybe kind of like ignore the daily routine, though that's where you get the experience. I really appreciate you when you pointed that it is very fundamental to reply in a standardized way and to follow maybe a kind of like formula to reply such a question rather than sticking to your cultured way of resolving matters which only exists in your enterprise but does not exist in the global fraternity. I like
correct.
that one.
Because you have to remember that you're talking to the person who's interviewing you, and they don't have any context. And besides, there's a certain standard process of troubleshooting issues. All right. So let's take, for example, you did mention that you can either do bottom down or sorry, top down, right, or bottom up, or you can do shoot in the middle, right? So let's break down these three categories. So if I do bottom up, what am I starting with? I'm starting with the physical layer of the OSI. So by
Yes.
doing the physical layer, I'm checking, is the network cable connected on the PC, right? If the network cable is connected, I'm checking if the network card is connected and are the drivers of the network card working. Now, when I'm doing these tests, there are certain things that I'm looking for. So when I'm testing for physical connectivity, when I plug in the network cable, what do I expect to see? I expect to see the lights of the network card turning on. If the lights don't go on, then I know that I've got an issue. But if the lights turn on, then I can tick that the network cable is fine. Oh, not necessarily the network cable is fine, but at least I'm seeing connectivity, right? When I'm testing the network card, there's something known as a loopback address that I have to ping 127.0.0.1. By pinging that, it basically confirms that the TCP suite on that device is working correctly. And then from there, I then move up to the next. So, so what I'm trying to get to is that these are standard processes that if you choose to go bottom up in your troubleshooting process, make sure that you cover these aspects. Okay, let's look top down. Top down means we're starting from the application layer. So what do I do? I go to a web browser. That's my starting point. I go www.google.com or .yahoo.com or youtube.com, whatever the situation is. Okay, I can't get to YouTube. Okay, what do? I need to verify if DNS is working. So I'm gonna do either an NS lookup, right, to confirm. Or maybe before I do an NS lookup, I can try and Yeah, so I'm going to do an NS lookup to try and see if DNS is resolving. I see that DNS is resolving, so that's fine. Maybe I can decide to ping my default gateway to see if I can get to my gateway, then from my gateway to my router, or I can do a trace route, which basically takes me hop by hop where I'm trying to get to. So all I'm just trying to get to is that whichever method you choose to explain, take someone through from a perspective that they don't know anything. And if you don't understand any question, just ask to say, you know what, you mentioned 1, 2, 3, 4. I just wanted to clarify. You said how many users are affected? 10. How many people are in the office? 50. Oh, okay. So 10 out of 50 are affected. Or how many people in the office? 50. How many people are affected? 50. Okay. So everyone in the office is affected. Yes. So by just asking these questions, it helps you gain perspective as to where should I look. Should I look here? Should I look there? Should I look here? I focus on by answering that question of is everyone affected or some users are affected? Is it wired? Is it wireless? I easily narrow down on what I'm looking for. But at the end of the day, it's not a there's not it's not a right or wrong answer, but you would get worried if I was interviewing you for a mechanic job and we can't start the engine of the car, and then you start going to the boot and checking the tires. I start getting worried because I'm like, okay, yes, maybe the tire doesn't have pressure. We don't argue that. But at the moment, the tire is not the issue of focus. The focus is the engine is not starting. So that's where you kind of like expose yourself when you kind of go into certain areas that someone is not looking for. They'll be like, but let's come back to this part. But it's a process. It's a process, and for those that are watching, if you think you can do better, please get in touch. Let's have a conversation. But this is the live environment that you encounter. When you're dealing with an interview, and sometimes it's always good to get feedback from the other end on where they're coming from. And most of the times, they don't know your environment. And if you want to go down your environment, it's not a bad thing. Explain it pretty well to say, if it was in our network, then now you're contextualizing it. If it was in our environment, on layer two, we always have a problematic um, media converter. So if users were not able to access, I know that that media converter is the exit point for that flow. So I would go to that media converter. So now you're providing context to why you're going to the media converter because you're telling me about your environment. I mean, there's a scenario for based. I guess for those that are watching, I guess the key takeaway is that 90% of the times when you go for an interview, they're not necessarily looking for a 100% well versed engineer. I guess what they're trying to establish is what do you know? What have you encountered? How relevant is that to their environment? And in instances where you need to be teachable, how easy are you to be able to be teachable to acclimatize? So yes, I might know RIP, but I don't know OSPF because I've never dealt with OSPF and I don't deal with OSPF. Your inability of not being able to deal with OSPF is not the disqualifying factor. All I want to know is that based on what you know on RIP, can I teach you OSPF? And then can you handle OSPF? Yes, as you start going in much senior roles, then yes, the expectation is probably going to need you to fully understand OSPF because if that is the primary protocol, you need to be able to understand it from the word go rather than learning it on the spot. But 90% of the times, it's just your understanding of the technology that is more important. So, yes, I might not have dealt with frame relay or on a day-to-day basis, but if you taught me frame relay today, or if I read about frame relay today, next week I'll have mastered frame relay and I can work with it. That's what they're basically looking for. So just be mindful that, you know, we get caught up too much on the technical aspects. I don't know frame relay, so all of a sudden I'm a bad candidate. No, the question is, what is it that you know? And what you know, do you know it well? Because I'm going to measure what I can teach you based on what you currently know. So if you tell me OSPF is your area of expertise, then answer every question I have on OSPF at least. That way, if I know that you're comfortable with OSPF, I can be then certain that if I teach you BGP tomorrow, it won't be too much of an issue for you to be able to grasp. So it is basically that. But once again, the key important part is if you don't know something, just say, I don't know. I haven't dealt with it in a long time. Give me time. I'll read it. I'll come back to you. Even if you come back after the interview, you're like, you know what? I'll come back to you and just send an email. Oh, by the way, that question that you asked me, there's the answer. I remembered. People are able to come through. So as we wrap down, this interview session, what are my key takeaways? Number one, have a story about yourself. And that story must be very precise. It must be short, it must be sweet, it must cover high level aspects of what they need to know in relation to the position. So, your previous positions, what you worked, what you're dealing with, what you're working currently, what technologies you're dealing with, that affect the position that you're applying for. Right. So, if I were to give a story, I'm applying for a junior network engineer role. I completed a degree in computer science. I know it was not related to networking, but after I completed, I had a mentor who walked me through networking and drove my passion. I got my CCNA and did my CCNP on Udemy, and now I work for a university where we deal with ABCD. Our network is 20,000 users, but at any given time it's about 5,000. But at peak, 20,000. We have X switches, X routers, and Aruba as our wireless. It took me a minute, but I kind of gave a summary of everything that you told me on what you do. So practice that and then be able to, you know, give give a story. And then on certain questions, try to be specific. And after that, just answer the question, take a step back, and then let it roll. And then the last part, scenario based questions, use the STAR technique: situation, the task, what was the action, what was the result, and what was your responsibility in that whole process in deriving the results. Once again, Bothwell, thank you very much for taking your time. Um, I really, really, really appreciate, making yourself vulnerable, allowing yourself to be interviewed, and for the benefit of others. And for the viewers, I trust you found value in this interview and you have key lessons that you can take away that you can help to improve yourself for the next interview. But once again, the challenge is still open. If you want to be the next person on the spot, please get in touch with me. My email address is tinei@thenetworkhustle.com. I will leave it in the show notes. Just reach out and I'll get in touch and we'll be able to schedule a meeting and we can go through one on one